Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630.
WMAL.
7:37 on the Morning Majority. Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Major Garrett for the National Journal in studio this morning.
Hey, I am here. Good morning, all.
You know, there's always fun. It's always fun to, get online and, you can go to National Journal online and you can read the stuff on the internet, but it's much better when it actually comes in the mail and you can just take it out of.
Yes, it is.
And you can just smell it. It's
a fine smelling magazine.
It really
I will
is
tell you that.
As magazines go.
So I got to ask you, I know you didn't see much of the Chris Wallace thing, but who had the worst week in Washington, Chris Wallace or Jim Riggleman, the manager of the Washington Nationals?
Well, since at this hour Chris Wallace still has a job, I would say Jim Riggleman had the worst week, but only barely.
Right. Though, did you see that he was out in a bar in Bethesda on Thursday night?
Riggleman, not Wallace.
Yeah, Jim Riggleman, not Chris Wallace, who may have been at a bar Thursday night as well.
Of course, me, that's every night.
Yeah, right.
I'm out in a bar in Bethesda.
Any night that ends in Y.
Exactly.
There you are. So what's the deal? What's the latest on the debt negotiations? I read in the Washington Post, at least yesterday, that now the military cutting is big in the game, and that if Republicans get on board with that, there may actually be a deal. Do you believe that?
I think there is a journalistic mentality that's taken hold that is looking for any possible ray of light that a deal is imminent, and I don't see it. I don't see it in any way, shape, or form. And the reason I don't see it is not only because you have deep ideological and philosophical differences, but you have camps that are looking at and constantly measuring their message against their focus groups and polling data. And both sides right now feel they are in the advantageous position. Now, of course, that cannot be true. Someone is going to win, but neither side is prepared to believe they're going to lose. So Republicans believe that they will not raise taxes, and that is a defensible position with the current economic anxiety. Democrats believe that they can't let Republicans not raise taxes, that they must insist that they raise taxes and not cut what they regard as sacred programs, Medicare, otherwise, other programs, as deeply as Republicans want. And they have the focus group data to reinforce their positions. So, I wrote in National Journal Daily today that the only thing I see changing in the next month is the faces you see on television, not the underlying rhetoric. And I'm actually of the mind now, based on my reporting, that what we're going to do is we're going to come right up to the August 2nd deadline. We're going to have a TARP-like near-death experience. We're going to have a market correction of 700, 800 points.
Yikes.
Because people are going to get freaked about this. And then something will break. But not until then. I just don't see it.
So you're of the firm belief that one side or the other will win, but there can be no compromise. That they're so entrenched, they're so dug in.
That the compromise will come after this near-death experience, and one side will crack.
And
that is not equal in my mind,
right.
A compromise, where both sides look at each other and say, look, let's spare the market, let's spare the country, let's spare everyone unmitigated grief, hold hands and jump off the cliff together. I just don't see that mentality taking hold.
I get the sense, we've talked to some Republicans. We had Jim DeMint on last week, and we've talked to other people, and I've heard them on television, I've read them in the newspaper. They really believe that, if we hit this August 2nd deadline, the end of the world isn't going to be
there. Michelle Bachmann said yesterday that we will be able to pay the debt, and then we just have to prioritize our spending after that, which means the Treasury Department and the government have to decide what not to pay that are other obligations, but we can pay the debt load, we can service the debt, and not default. Well, that means Social Security payments, other kind of payments just don't go out the door. I'm not necessarily saying it has to be Social Security, but that would be one of the things Democrats would suggest might be jeopardized. There's another component to this. Among the 87-member freshman class, there is deep-seated skepticism that this August 2nd deadline is even real in the first place.
Well, the last one wasn't real, was it? I got confused.
That's part of their mentality.
Right.
They say, wait a minute, how does this move? And now the Treasury Department, you call them, and I've talked to their experts, they say, look, this is just a green eye shade thing. They run the numbers constantly, and selling off of treasuries and revenue that comes in from the economic growth, blah, 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 all these factors add up to a date. But I'm telling you, among the House freshmen, they're like, wait a minute, it just happens to be the week we're supposed to go on our summer recess. Honestly, that's just a coincidence. I'm supposed to sit here and believe that the fate of the United States, faith and credit,
right,
is actually coming to a head just a couple of days before we're supposed to go on a 5-week recess? Are you kidding me? They don't believe it. And that skepticism about the date, number one, and that skepticism, number two, about the underlying economic effect of a quote-unquote technical default have entrenched Republicans in a way that I still don't believe the White House or House and Senate Democrats have come anywhere close to internalizing.
Alternate viewpoint. Cantor walks away from the deficit reduction talks, says it has to be the Speaker. Cantor was always the hardline guy. Some people have said Boehner might be a little more loosey-goosey about this. And then you got Tom Coburn out there who is saying things like, well, we might have to compromise. Is a case being made in some quarters to give Boehner cover if he has to go with some kind of tax increase?
The Speaker put out a statement on Friday that must be read by everyone in Washington. The Speaker said tax increases cannot and will not pass the House conference.
That doesn't say he wouldn't be willing to compromise, that it can't pass the House.
Well, he's not going to bring anything to the floor that can't pass.
Right, that's the issue. Is the political calculus for passing tax hikes in the houses
doesn't exist.
Right.
And in the Senate, you can't get 60 votes for something that doesn't have tax increases in it because you can't get the Democratic votes you need to get over the 60 vote
Then
threshold.
help me understand why Cantor walks away and says it's up to Boehner now. Why did they need to change the personnel?
What Cantor said is up to the president.
who is now entering, right?
It's up to the president to negotiate with the Speaker. But Cantor was put in those talks in part by Boehner to make sure that if there is a perceived division between the two, and I've always believed that was a division largely as caricature. I don't think Cantor and Boehner are nearly as far apart ideologically or politically or operationally as people suggest they are. Their staffs don't get along. That's true. There is tremendous rivalry there. But the two of those guys are moving and have moved that Republican conference in exactly the same direction. And Cantor was there when the shutdown was averted and that budget deal was sealed. This is going to have to be a presidential decision. And what Republicans keep telling the president is give in on taxes. And I'm telling you, the president's not going to give in on taxes. Democrats don't believe he needs to. And they have, again, this internal data that says don't budge. So right now, I'd say for the next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to have these we can't caucus meetings. Right. The Democrats say we can't do that, and they'll meet with Republicans who say we can't do that. And we'll just have the we can't caucus for a month.
Well, it seems to me the number of people, of the American people who are against raising the debt ceiling and sort of they're
well
very,
over 50%.
Yes, very high enough, the same numbers that on Medicare or whatever entitlement reform, Democrats would be going, oh, there's no way you can ever do this political suicide, and yet they think the public's on their side in this case. Right,
because they think ultimately the underlying choices are so stark that when the public is presented with them and the implications of them, the public will say, no, that's too far. We can't take cuts of that magnitude. And on the defense side, there will be changes. There's no question about it. But you simply cannot get to where they need to get in the magnitude of savings on the defense budget alone. You just can't.
All right, Major Garrett from National Journal is here with us. More coming up.
630 WMAL.
751 on WMAL. Morning Majority. Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson. Major Garrett from National Journal is in the studio. We said it was a bad week for Jim Riggleman, maybe even Chris Wallace. You'd have to say it was also probably a bad week polling-wise for John Huntsman and Tim Pawlenty, especially in Iowa.
Well, I would say worse for Tim Pawlenty. John Huntsman I never thought would at this point have any real traction in a place like Iowa. He's too brand new. Tim Pawlenty's in the neighborhood and has been for quite some time and has spent a good deal of time.
He's been working that hard in Iowa.
Yes, and he announced there in Des Moines, the biggest media market in the state, the media market that you go to if you want to radiate your message across the state. His recruitment of activists there is pretty shallow. He just isn't catching on, and I'm telling you, based on my understanding of the campaign right now, and of course that accepts up front that things change rapidly, if Tim Pawlenty can't perform better than these numbers and move them way up before the August straw poll, he's going to have a really tough time, because Iowa's the place he needs to plant his flag, because he's going to have a very hard time in New Hampshire and probably mixed results at best in South Carolina. He needs to do well in Iowa.
Much has been made of the fact that Michelle Bachmann did very well in this poll, right behind Romney. Romney had 23, Bachmann had 22. But it's sort of, you have to point out, Palin wasn't in this poll because he's not an announced candidate. Perry, who many people is all but certain believe he's going to get in. He's going to get in. He's not in this poll either.
So those are two huge factors, and Sarah Palin will be, I believe, in Iowa, if not this week, next week, with the launch of her movie, the documentary about her.
I think Tuesday, tomorrow. Palin, Bachmann, and Obama are all in Iowa.
There you go. Yeah. So I still am skeptical that Sarah Palin gets in. I know everyone thinks this movie is the lead pipe cinch explainer that she's going to get in. Why would you do this? Why would you synchronize all this if you weren't going to run? I still don't think she's going to run. Rick Perry, though, I think he's going to get in.
You can't figure out whatever Sarah Palin's going to do. I mean,
anytime anyone says, why would she do this? Because she is Sarah Palin, because you will pay attention and write about it. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Bus tours, trips to the Sudan, and things like that, and then they get canceled, and everyone's like just scratching their head. Figure
what's going on exactly.
Good to see you again, Major.
Always a pleasure, gang.
We appreciate you coming in, and we'll be.
And that body scan made you look better too.
Yeah,
Brian.
well,
he sent us a picture of his body scan.
Strong like bull, I am. I'm telling you.
Yeah. It's got a great
I was really
heart.
joking about that. He looks exactly the same.
7:54 on WMAL.
Which is not good.